She thought she knew everything about him, the jokes he told, the places he frequented, and the suspiciously old sneakers he insisted on wearing. In her eyes, he was just a sweet, broke guy, destined for a mediocre life. But one night, with a single phone call, her entire world shifted. The man she had ridiculed for living on a tight budget turned out to have a past far more complicated and a future far more lavish than she ever imagined. Prepare yourself for a wild ride of secrets, betrayal, heartbreak, and redemption. This is the unbelievable tale of how one woman discovered that money isn't always worn on a sleeve or flaunted in a wallet. Caroline Walsh had lived most of her 26 years in the quiet suburb of Greenock, New Jersey, where small-town charm flirted incessantly with big-city ambitions. She was raised in a modest household, a 2-bedroom bungalow shared with her parents, Lily and Frederick Walsh, both of whom worked hard to ensure Caroline never felt deprived. By the time Caroline reached high school, she had developed an intense longing for a more glamorous life. This yearning led her to immerse herself in gossip magazines and reality television, dreaming of penthouses in Manhattan and cross-continental vacations in private jets. That's why when she first met Ethan Addison at a local cafe one breezy spring evening, she expected him to be just another ordinary guy. He wore a simple t-shirt and a pair of well-worn sneakers, the kind any average college student might have. With only a backward baseball cap and a gentle smile to distinguish him, Ethan was definitely not the type to turn heads in a crowd. And yet something about him, maybe it was the sincerity in his voice or the way he listened, sparked Caroline's curiosity. He ordered a hot chocolate instead of the trendy triple-shot espresso everyone else seemed to love, and as he handed a crisp $20 bill to the barista, he made a joke about her bright purple nails, setting off an easy, friendly laughter behind the counter. Caroline had always been a decent judge of character, at least she liked to think so, and her first impression was that Ethan was kind, a bit goofy, and perhaps pleasantly unassuming. She didn't know, however, that she was about to embark on a relationship that would rattle every assumption she'd made about money, identity, and self-worth. They started seeing each other more frequently, meeting up at the cozy cafe or strolling through Greenock's few scenic spots. The synergy between them was undeniable. Ethan seemed far removed from the high-strung social climbing mindset Caroline often fell prey to. Instead, he was laid-back, thoughtful, and refreshingly non-judgmental. He asked about her childhood, her aspirations, her favorite TV shows, even her obsession with traveling to the French Riviera one day. And he truly listened. It was as though her words were small, precious stones, and he collected them with reverence. Still lingering in the background of Caroline's mind was the question of Ethan's financial situation. She'd joke with her friend Clarissa Coleman about how Ethan insisted on going to thrifty restaurants and always seemed to keep an eye on daily deals. Clarissa would just shrug and say, "Hey, at least he's not irresponsible, right?" Caroline agreed with a half-smile, but something inside her, the side that daydreamed of extravagance, was uneasy. She couldn't help noticing that while Ethan paid in cash, he never really spent much. He avoided talk about splurging and stuck to easy, affordable dates. One time, Caroline even teased him, suggesting they go to the brand-new oceanfront restaurant in the nearby city of Seacrest, rumored to be $200 a plate. Ethan had politely countered, "Let's skip that place. I'm not a fan of overpriced risotto. Let me cook you dinner instead." In that moment, Caroline felt a flicker of disappointment, but she pushed it aside, thinking, "He's sweet. I can handle some thrifty dinner dates, right?" Despite her attempts to stay focused on the positives, Caroline couldn't entirely ignore the gentle but constant pressure from the people around her. After a couple of months, her mother asked casually, "So does Ethan have a decent job?" Her father, less delicate, inquired, "How's a young man going to support a family if he can't even take you somewhere nice?" Once in a while, her parents weren't the only ones sharing their opinions. Caroline's circle of friends, some with actual Manhattan connections, repeatedly reminded her of how a relationship should be fabulously romantic, complete with glamorous date spots and gifts. They contrasted Ethan's modest approach with that of Kelsey Harmon's boyfriend, who had just flown her to Miami for her birthday weekend. The more Caroline heard stories like these, the more her initial contentment eroded. She loved Ethan's gentleness and the way he understood her, but she started feeling resentful too. Why couldn't he at least meet her halfway? Buy her something nice once in a while, surprise her with a fancy dinner, just once. As the weeks rolled on, this resentment grew nurtured by the unending comparisons swirling around her. Ethan's birthday was around the corner, and Caroline wanted to do something special. She decided to cook him a homemade meal, lemon garlic chicken mashed potatoes and chocolate mousse for dessert. She purchased all the ingredients, set up her tiny kitchen with candles and a small bouquet of lilies. When Ethan arrived, he was visibly touched by the effort. He even brought a bottle of red wine, albeit from the discount shelf at the local liquor store. Caroline tried to smile, reminding herself that it was the thought that counted. They settled into a comfortable rhythm as they ate, bantering about their day. Then Caroline noticed the watch around his wrist. It looked distinctly more expensive than anything else he owned. She couldn't make out the brand immediately, but something about its design, subtle gold trimming intricate hands, suggested a high-end timepiece. "Your watch," she remarked casually. "It looks fancy." Ethan glanced down at his wrist, like he'd forgotten he had it on. "Oh, this old thing, my grandfather gave it to me. It's more sentimental than anything else." Caroline raised an eyebrow. The watch was far too pristine to be old, but she held her tongue. After they finished dinner and dessert, she gave him a small gift, a vintage record from his favorite 80s band. He beamed, kissing her gently on the forehead. As they cleared the dishes, Caroline's curiosity grew. Why would someone who practically pinched pennies own a watch like that? Did it mean there was more to Ethan than meets the eye? Caroline couldn't help her frustration. She had tried to talk about her future dreams with Ethan, again and again, travel a nicer home, comfortable living. Yet his standard response was always something along the lines of, "Let's live in the moment. We can take it slow. I don't want to rush into spending a fortune." It wasn't just about spending a fortune, she told herself. It was about building a life of excitement, of seizing opportunities. But every time she even hinted at money, Ethan would grow oddly quiet or joke it off. Caroline began to unleash subtle digs. During a night out at Charlie's pub with friends, she made a mocking remark about Ethan's thrifty ways as he attempted to order the cheapest drink on the menu. Everyone laughed, although Clarissa shot Caroline a disapproving glance. Ethan laughed along, but Caroline could see a flicker of hurt in his eyes. The guilt in her gut was immediate and sharp, but the moment was fleeting, overpowered by the laughter and music in the background. In a private moment, Clarissa cornered Caroline. "Look, I don't know what's going on with you two, but if you're not happy with how he spends his money, you should probably have a real conversation instead of snarky one-liners." Caroline just shrugged. I know. Sometimes I want to scream. He's so closed off about finances, and I'm left wondering if I'm committing myself to a guy with no ambition." Clarissa sighed. "Just tread carefully. Okay, no one deserves to be belittled." Over time, Ethan's reluctance to share details about his finances or family background only fueled Caroline's suspicions. She'd try to ask, "Where exactly is your family from, or what was your grandfather like?" And Ethan would shrug. "They're from out west," he said vaguely. "We're not super close." And that was that. Curiosity gnawed at Caroline. she took to social media, scouring for any sign of Ethan's family. His own profiles were minimal, a handful of photos from years ago, typically group shots at someone's birthday or a random road trip. The Addison family's name didn't pop up in any local context. No obituary for a grandfather, no mention of any estate. She couldn't find a single relative from his side. It was like Ethan had materialized out of thin air. She turned to snooping. In one instance, she lightly asked, "Hey, if you ever have any old family pics, I'd love to see them." But Ethan deflected, "They're probably in storage somewhere. We'll find them eventually." Even though she sensed Ethan's discomfort, Caroline pressed on. She felt convinced there was some hidden puzzle piece, the fancy watch, his reluctance to talk about his family the way he always had. Crisp bills in his wallet, yet avoided expensive outings. After a tense dinner date that had ended with them splitting the bill, Caroline's frustration boiled over in front of her friends. Tracy Chambers, an old classmate who thrived on drama, insisted on details. Before Caroline realized it, she began venting, "He's stingy. I'm telling you guys, he's the cheapest man alive. We have to count every last penny or we don't do anything. It's driving me crazy. Does he even have a real job? Where does he live? You'd think I'd know by now. But I don't, because he refuses to invite me over." Tracy was delighted. She teased Caroline in return, half joking, half goading her on. "Is it possible you're dating some kind of con artist? Maybe he's just broke, or maybe he's living with his parents in a rundown shack." Caroline laughed along, but deep down, a part of her cringed at the conversation. She was crossing a line, mocking Ethan behind his back. It didn't feel good, but she was in too deep. She wanted confirmation that she wasn't overreacting, that she deserved a partner willing to embrace her dreams of a better life. As the weeks rolled by, Caroline and Ethan started arguing more. Little disagreements about dinner choices or weekend plans morphed into bigger conversations about life goals and priorities. Caroline finally snapped one night after Ethan suggested they skip an upcoming art exhibition in Manhattan because the tickets were too steep. "This is exhausting," Caroline cried. "Why can't we do anything remotely special? I'm sick of living like a college student." Ethan's eyes hardened, his normally gentle voice firm. "You think I'm just some jobless loser who can barely afford his rent, don't you?" Caroline's guilt manifested as defensiveness. "I'm not saying you're a loser, but yes, I do want more out of life, and if you can't give me that, maybe we aren't right for each other." Her words felt harsh, even as she said them, but she didn't take them back. Ethan flinched. A long, tense silence followed. "I'll never hold you back," he finally said, voice low. Then he stood up and left Caroline's apartment, shutting the door gently behind him. She sank into her couch, tears brimming in her eyes. She felt the immediate sting of regret, but also a potent sense of relief, as though a confession had finally been made. The next few days were agonizing. Caroline mulled over whether she'd gone too far, or perhaps told the truth that needed to be told. She half expected Ethan to call, apologize, promise to do better. But no call came. Then, a week later, her phone rang late at night. Groggy from half sleep, she answered. A formal, distant voice on the other end asked, "Is this Caroline Walsh?" "Yes, speaking." "My name is Hannah Addison," the voice said. "Ethan's sister. Please don't hang up. I need your help. I'm in Seacrest, and I'd like to meet you. It's about Ethan." Caroline's head spun. Ethan had a sister. Why is she calling me? She tried to gather her wits. "Oh, hi. Sure, I guess, but Ethan never mentioned you. Is everything okay?" Hannah hesitated. "We've had a complicated relationship, but I promise if you meet me, you'll understand. I'll be at the Golden Oak Hotel Lounge tomorrow at 7. Please come." The line went dead. Caroline lay awake, her heart hammering. She had no idea what to expect. Perhaps Hannah was estranged and needed to reconnect with Ethan through Caroline. Or maybe Ethan was in trouble. The next day, Caroline arrived at the Golden Oak Hotel lounge with sweaty palms and a churning gut. She scanned the crowd of business travelers and tourists. Her eyes landed on a tall, elegant woman in a fitted blazer, wavy brunette hair, and a tense expression. The woman offered a small wave. "I'm Hannah Addison," she said, as Caroline approached. Her handshake was brisk, but not unfriendly. They took seats in a quiet corner. Hannah wasted no time. "I know you've been seeing my brother. I also know you two have hit a rough patch." Caroline could barely disguise her confusion. "Yes, we have. Honestly, I'm surprised you even know about me." Hannah pursed her lips. "Ethan tells me more than you'd think. He's private, but that doesn't mean he doesn't confide in someone." Caroline looked down at her hands. "He never mentioned having a sister." Hannah sighed. "Let's just say we had an agreement, no bringing up our family unless absolutely necessary. Our family's complicated." Caroline's curiosity piqued. Complicated how Hannah glanced around, ensuring they weren't overheard. Then leaning in, she whispered, "Our grandfather is Peter Addison. Ring a bell." Caroline shook her head, and Hannah looked momentarily surprised. "He's a major real estate developer, has projects across the country. Technically, Addison Properties is one of the bigger firms in the tri-state area. It's a well-known family name in certain circles. Grandfather's net worth is well into the 9 figures. Caroline's eyes widened. For a moment, her mind went blank. "Wait, so you're telling me Ethan is from that Addison family? The ones who built Addison Towers in Manhattan?" Hannah gave a wry nod. "Yes, our father inherited part of the business, but after he passed, Grandfather took over everything. Ethan and I were raised in a life of enormous privilege, but also enormous expectations. Ethan hated it. He walked away to forge his own path. I stayed." Caroline's jaw dropped, her cheeks growing hot. So Ethan wasn't broke at all. He was the potential heir to a massive fortune, and he'd hidden it from her. Hannah continued, "Ethan's approach to life might seem thrifty or cheap, but it's not about money. He's rebelling against a world he found too shallow. He doesn't trust people. The Addison name brought him fake friends, gold-digging girlfriends, and constant scrutiny. So he left behind the Addison mansion in Connecticut and came here to live on his own terms." Caroline felt a flush of shame. All the times she'd mocked him for being broke replayed in her mind. But she was also hurt and confused. Then why hide it from me? Did he think I was a gold digger too? Hannah sighed. He didn't want to risk it. He wanted a real relationship. The watch you saw, that was our grandfather's parting gift. Ethan wears it only on special occasions, probably out of nostalgia. Caroline took a few deep breaths, her thoughts swirling in every direction. "Why are you telling me all this now?" "Because Hannah said," her voice catching, "our grandfather is gravely ill. He's demanding Ethan return to the family estate. My brother's stubborn. He might only come back if someone he trusts urges him to someone like you." Caroline's heart clenched. Ethan's beloved grandfather might be dying, and she was the key to bridging the gap. But after their recent fights, after the bitterness she'd shown, would Ethan even listen to her? Caroline left the Golden Oak Hotel in a daze, hugging her jacket around her despite the mild weather. She felt an avalanche of guilt pressing down on her. Ethan hadn't been cheap. He'd been cautious. He'd avoided fancy restaurants, not because he couldn't afford them, but because he didn't want to flash money around, or maybe he didn't trust how people would react. Perhaps he'd met women in the past who only saw him as a meal ticket. And here she was, pushing him to show off wealth he'd deliberately chosen to reject. She sank into her car's seat and stared at the steering wheel, stunned by how badly she'd misjudged him. Worst of all, the memory of her mocking him in front of her friends stung like a fresh burn. Caroline spent the next day locked in her apartment phone, silent mind churning. Finally, she decided she needed to see Ethan face to face. She had to hear his side, had to apologize. Even if their relationship was irreparable, she couldn't let him walk away without understanding that she knew his secret and that she wanted to make it right. She texted Ethan, "We need to talk. It's important." To her relief, he responded, "Meet me at Harbour Pier at 8 p.m. That night, the pier was softly lit by lampposts. Seagulls squawked overhead as the sun sank into a fiery orange horizon. Caroline spotted Ethan standing at the rail, looking out over the water. His posture was stiff, and for a moment, Caroline hesitated, fear snaking through her. Then she forced herself to approach. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she began. Ethan nodded, arms folded. "I was surprised to hear from you, but I'm glad you reached out." A pregnant pause loomed between them. Finally, Caroline blurted, "I know. About your family, Hannah called me." Ethan's eyes widened. She did what Caroline explained, the phone call, the meeting at the hotel, and Hannah's pleas for Ethan to return to see their grandfather. She kept her voice steady, but she could feel the tension crackling in the air. When she finished, Ethan let out a slow breath. "I didn't want you to find out like this," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I lied to you. I never wanted to pretend to be someone else. I just needed to be sure you saw me for who I was, without all the Addison baggage." Caroline felt tears sting her eyes. "And I messed it all up, didn't I? Mocking you, complaining. I'm so sorry." If I'd known, Ethan's expression flickered with pain. "Would it have made any difference if you'd known? Or would you have just tried even harder to push me towards some glamorous lifestyle I left behind for a reason?" Caroline clasped her hands together. "I don't know. Probably. But that doesn't excuse my behavior. I saw you as a broke guy holding me back. That was unfair and shallow." Ethan turned back toward the water, silent. Then he spoke. "I've seen people get $signs in their eyes the moment they hear Addison. My last girlfriend, Anna, she only stuck around because she thought I'd pay her credit card bills once we got serious. That's why I didn't tell you. I guess I was hoping you'd accept me for me. I wanted a fresh start." Caroline swallowed. "I get that now. I want to prove to you that I'm not like that I really do care. And also, your sister said your grandfather's in critical condition. Maybe it's time to make peace. Don't walk away from your family if there's still a chance to fix things." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's not so simple. Grandfather wants me to take my place in the business, become the face of Addison Properties with Hannah. That's exactly the life I rejected." "Maybe," Caroline said gently, "but this might be your last chance to see him. Whatever your issues, at least say goodbye." Ethan's eyes brimmed with conflicting emotions. "Would you come with me?" he asked, voice trembling. "I don't want to face them alone." Caroline felt a rush of relief. Yes, of course." They decided to go to the Addison estate together the following weekend. It was a 3-hour drive into the Connecticut countryside, past rolling hills and immaculate farmland. Caroline's heart thumped as they neared an ornate iron gate that stretched across a long, winding driveway. At the gate, a uniformed guard peered into their car, and upon recognizing Ethan, pressed a button that made the gate swing open in silent grandeur. Caroline's eyes widened as they wound up a carefully manicured driveway lined with magnolia trees. And then there it was, a colossal Georgian-style mansion, complete with regal columns and countless windows reflecting the midday sun. It was like stepping into a movie set. "You grew up here," Caroline whispered in awe. Ethan shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, but Caroline could see the flicker of old memories behind his gaze. Yeah, this was home. As they stepped out of the car, Hannah emerged from the double doors, flanked by two staff members. The siblings exchanged stiff greetings. Caroline noticed the tension in Ethan's posture, the uncertain smile on Hannah's face. An older woman in a neat black dress came rushing out next. An aunt, perhaps? No, she introduced herself as Mrs. Flanagan, the house manager who'd practically raised Ethan and Hannah. "Thank goodness you're here," Mrs. Flanagan said, wringing her hands. "Your grandfather's been asking for you." Ethan looked up at the mansion windows with apprehension. Then he squared his shoulders and followed Mrs. Flanagan inside. Caroline walked beside him, feeling a strange sense of intrusion in a world so unlike her own. They were led through an opulent foyer, high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, gleaming marble floors. Caroline felt underdressed in her simple blouse and jeans. Finally, they arrived at a large, richly decorated bedroom. In the center stood an ornate four-poster bed, and lying there was a frail old man connected to a tangle of medical equipment. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were bright, filled with an intense focus. "Ethan," he croaked, voice subdued but urgent. Ethan approached the bed, kneeling down so that his grandfather could see him better. "Hey, grandfather," he said softly, the anger and bitterness in his face replaced by deep sadness. Peter Addison lifted a trembling hand. "I've waited for you," he managed. He cast a glance at Caroline. "Who's this Ethan?" introduced her. "My girlfriend, Caroline Walsh." Peter Addison offered a faint nod, then returned his gaze to Ethan. "I made mistakes," he said, voice cracking. "I demanded too much, forced you to follow my path. I see that now." Ethan's expression flickered with pain. "You wanted me to be someone I wasn't." A raspy breath. "Still, you're an Addison. This empire, the Addison name, it's yours too. I need you to look after it. Hannah can't do it alone." Ethan swallowed hard. Caroline stood quietly, feeling like a spectator to a deeply personal family drama. She recalled the moment Ethan had told her he wanted no part of the Addison fortune. Would he change his mind for his dying grandfather? Peter reached for Ethan's hand grip, surprisingly strong. "Promise me you'll come back, help your sister." Then his voice dropped further. "Or everything we've built will fade." At dinner that evening, the Addison family dynamic revealed itself in full force. Hannah pressed for details on Ethan's life in Greenock, but he offered short, polite answers, refusing to dwell on any specifics. Caroline noticed how Hannah's face fell when she realized how distant Ethan was from the business. During dessert, another family member, Uncle Gregory, showed up. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and reeking of condescension. He brushed past Caroline as if she were invisible, focusing instead on Ethan. "Well, look who finally decided to show up," Gregory drawled. "Did you come to your senses, or are you just here to say your last goodbyes?" Ethan bristled. "I'm here because grandfather asked for me. I'm not here to argue about life choices." Gregory smirked. "Still playing that I don't need money card, huh? Let's see how far that takes you when you can't afford your own mortgage." Caroline saw Ethan's jaw tighten. Before he could reply, Hannah cut in. "Uncle Gregory, this is neither the time nor the place. Can we please focus on grandfather's condition?" But the tension in the room was palpable. Caroline felt out of place, like an outsider, peering into a fierce, deeply rooted family struggle. Money was power here, but it was also the source of every wedge in their relationships. As the evening wore on, it became clear that Ethan was the outcast, the rebellious Addison. and the rest of them, even if they claimed to care, seemed more concerned about the future of Addison Properties than the emotional well-being of Ethan. Late that night, unable to sleep in the unfamiliar luxury of the guest suite, Caroline wandered through a labyrinth of corridors until she stumbled upon a quiet library. Hundreds of leather-bound books lined the walls, and large windows offered a view of moonlit gardens. She found Ethan there, perched on a window seat, staring outside. "I needed some air," he murmured, noticing her presence. "But the rest of this house is suffocating." Caroline approached slowly. "You okay?" He shook his head, turning to face her. "I hate how they act. Everything's about inheritance business money, and here I am, feeling like the black sheep just for wanting to live a normal life." Caroline sat beside him, sliding her hand into his. "I understand. Really, I do. It's just, your grandfather is dying, and he's asking for this one thing." Ethan exhaled. "Yes, and it complicates everything. If I say no, I feel like I'm letting him down in his final days. If I say yes, I'm giving up the life I built, the life I actually want. Do I even belong in this fancy estate anymore?" Caroline squeezed his hand. "I don't know, but you won't be alone. I'll support whatever you decide." The corners of Ethan's mouth curled into a faint smile. "What did I do to deserve you?" Caroline felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm the one who feels unworthy," she admitted, voice trembling. "I mocked you, pushed you for more, not understanding that you were already carrying this massive burden. I'm sorry." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I've forgiven you. Just promise me you'll be honest with me from now on." She nodded, tears threatening to fall. They embraced under the moonlight, a tender moment that felt both fragile and hopeful. The next morning, Caroline woke to hushed but urgent voices echoing through the mansion. She threw on a robe and ventured into the hallway, where she found Hannah pacing outside grandfather's room, phone in hand. "What's wrong?" Caroline asked. Hannah looked distraught. "Uncle Gregory, he's stirring up trouble. He's convinced the family board that Ethan coming back is a mistake unless he signs an agreement to remain in the business for at least 5 years. Caroline's stomach turned. An agreement? That's insane. Ethan hasn't even decided if he wants to join Addison Properties, let alone commit for half a decade. Hannah nodded grimly. Uncle Gregory's been trying to wrest control for years. If Ethan signs this contract under grandfather's pressure, Gregory gets what he wants. Guaranteed control with Ethan locked in. If Ethan refuses, Gregory gets to paint him as a deserter who abandoned a dying man's wish. Caroline rubbed her eyes in disbelief. So basically your uncle is blackmailing Ethan with your grandfather's last wish. Exactly, Hannah said softly. And to top it off, there's a rumor going around that Ethan only showed up because he's broke and wants his inheritance. God knows who leaked that. Now the board is all riled up. Caroline felt a surge of anger. Ethan came to help, and now it was being twisted against him. She marched toward grandfather's room, unsure of how to fix this, but determined to stand by Ethan. Ethan was already in grandfather's bedroom, speaking with Uncle Gregory. The older man was rattling off clauses from a legal document, swirling a pen in the air. Sign here, Gregory insisted. Grandfather's given you a chance to step up. Don't waste it. Ethan's eyes flickered with pain. I haven't even read this thoroughly. You expect me to commit my life without a second thought? Gregory's gaze was cold. Don't pretend you haven't fantasized about this. You always come crawling back. You know this is where you truly belong. Caroline stood in the doorway, fists clenched. Summoning courage, she stepped forward. How about giving him time? You can't corner him like this. Gregory turned to her with a sneer. And who are you to meddle in family business. Caroline lifted her chin. Ethan's girlfriend, and the only reason he's here is because he loves his grandfather, not because of your petty manipulations. Gregory opened his mouth to retort, but suddenly they heard a low moan from the bed. Peter Addison, roused by the argument, beckoned Ethan closer. "Don't let them bully you," he whispered, voice weak. "Just do what your heart says." Ethan took a trembling breath. "Grandfather, I don't want the business. I came to see you to be there for you, but it's not my life." A flicker of sadness passed over the old man's eyes. Then faintly he managed, "Then at least promise me you'll stay until—" He trailed off, words caught in his throat. Ethan nodded, voice thick with emotion. "I'm not leaving your side." In the days that followed, Ethan refused to sign anything. He made it clear to Gregory, Hannah, and the board that he was here for family, not business. Meanwhile, Caroline felt tension coil around the entire estate. Some staff whispered that Ethan was defying the Addison tradition. Others quietly rooted for him, remembering the gentle boy who'd once treated them with kindness. Caroline stayed close to Ethan, serving as a buffer whenever Gregory tried to push the issue of the contract. Hannah, torn between loyalty to the business and love for her brother, tried to mediate, but Gregory was relentless. As the week dragged on, Peter Addison's health deteriorated further. Doctors and nurses came and went, hooking him up to more machines. Ethan spent hours by his grandfather's bedside, holding his hand, sometimes talking softly about the past, sometimes just sitting in reflective silence. Caroline watched it all, her heart aching for Ethan. He'd come to say goodbye and found himself trapped in a swirl of family politics. Late one night, after spending hours in grandfather's room, Ethan found Caroline in the guest suite. His eyes were red from tears, face etched with exhaustion. She didn't say anything, just opened her arms, and he collapsed against her, sobbing quietly. "He's slipping away," Ethan whispered. "And I'm still so angry. Angry he forced this life on me. Angry Uncle Gregory is making this harder. Angry at everyone, even though grandfather is suffering." Caroline ran her fingers through his hair, tears of her own gathering. "It's okay to be angry, but remember you're here doing what you can." Ethan looked at her eyes full of gratitude and despair. "You were right to push me to come here. At least I have these last moments with him." They held each other in the dim glow of a bedside lamp, the mansion eerily quiet around them. Outside, a heavy rain began to fall, lightning flashing across the sky. It felt like a reflection of the turmoil swirling inside them both. The next morning, Caroline was heading downstairs for breakfast when she saw Uncle Gregory making a hushed phone call. She paused, staying out of sight, eavesdropping. Her heart pounded as she caught snippets of conversation. "No, we can't move forward until Ethan signs. I don't care if it means we lose the old man's good graces. This is Addison property, and the board will do as I say. If you leak the story, I'll deny everything." Caroline's stomach churned. Leak the story. So Gregory was indeed behind rumors that Ethan was broke and money-grubbing. She felt a swirl of fury. She stepped forward, intending to confront him, but a hand gently pulled her back. It was Hannah. She shook her head, her face determined. "Don't do it here," Hannah whispered once Gregory walked away. "He'll just deny it." "You need proof." Caroline pressed her lips together, frustration simmering. "He can't keep tarnishing Ethan's name like this." Hannah nodded. "Believe me, I know. I've watched him manipulate the board for years. But there's something we can do." Caroline raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Hannah glanced around, then motioned for Caroline to follow her into a vacant study. Once inside, Hannah explained her plan in hushed tones. Uncle Gregory is hungry for power. If grandfather dies and Ethan refuses to take his place, Gregory thinks he'll be the undisputed head of Addison Properties. But if we show the board that Gregory's been orchestrating slander and blackmail, they'll consider removing him from power. And then Ethan won't feel pressure. Maybe he'll even be able to keep a partial non-controlling share if he wants, or walk away gracefully. Caroline was wary. You think we can gather evidence that Gregory is behind these leaks? Hannah sighed. I've been collecting documents, anonymous emails that originated from his private server, transaction records of hush money he paid to certain reporters. If you help me confront him at the right moment, we could take him down. Caroline felt a wave of relief. For Ethan, I'm in. Over the next couple of days, Caroline and Hannah pooled their resources. They combed through digital archives, scrutinized shady financial transactions, building a case strong enough to expose Gregory's schemes to the family board. Meanwhile, Ethan remained blissfully unaware of their covert operation. He spent most of his days with his grandfather, though the old man was drifting in and out of consciousness. Caroline's heart ached every time she glimpsed Ethan by that bed. She wanted to rush in to comfort him, to shield him from everything. But she knew the best way to help him now was to ensure that Gregory no longer threatened his peace of mind. The tension in the mansion was suffocating. Whenever Gregory approached, Caroline felt her skin crawl. He still tried to corner Ethan, always brandishing the contract, reminding him how disappointed the Addison family would be if he didn't sign. Ethan's responses were always the same: no decision yet, or a firm no. Each refusal fueled Gregory's quiet rage. At last, Hannah declared they had enough evidence. The final piece was a recorded phone call from a finance officer who admitted Gregory had authorized payments to a tabloid journalist on behalf of an anonymous Addison family member. That Addison family member, it was clear, was Gregory. The family board convened in the Addison Mansion's grand dining hall, a place ordinarily reserved for lavish banquets. Now, its long mahogany table was covered with documents, laptops, and somber faces. Representatives from Addison Properties lawyers, a few older relatives, everyone had gathered to discuss the future of the business in light of Peter Addison's deteriorating condition. Gregory sat at the head of the table, flanked by two attorneys. Hannah and Ethan arrived together, Caroline trailing behind them. A hush fell over the room. Gregory cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "We're here to finalize succession plans. With Peter Addison unable to continue leading, we must decide who will take the reins." He cast a cold glance at Ethan. "That means we need to clarify Ethan's intentions." Ethan set his jaw, but Hannah spoke first. "We'll get to that. But before we do, we have evidence that certain board members, one in particular, have engaged in unethical behavior to manipulate the succession plan." A ripple of surprise spread across the room. Gregory's mouth set in a thin line. "Explain yourself, Hannah." With a resolute nod, Hannah slid a manila folder across the table, then pressed a button on her phone to play the recorded phone call. The audio crackled to life, revealing Gregory's conversation with the finance officer, instructions to leak stories discrediting Ethan to pressure him into signing the contract. Gasps erupted around the table. Gregory's face turned an alarming shade of crimson. "This is ridiculous. Fabricated nonsense." Caroline stepped forward, nerves aflutter. "Those documents show bank transactions from your personal account to known tabloid journalists. And these emails," she held up printed copies, "were sent from your private email. They detail your plan to discredit Ethan so the board would side with you." Gregory spluttered, How dare you barge into family affairs? You have no standing here." "She does," Ethan interrupted, voice low but commanding. "She's my partner, and she's telling the truth." An older board member, Ms. Rosenthal, leaned over the documents, her expression grim. "Gregory, these documents look legitimate. You've got some explaining to do." Gregory tried to stand, but a lawyer pinned him with a steely gaze. "I suggest you remain seated, Mr. Addison." The resulting uproar was immediate. Half the board was shocked, others furious. Finally, Ms. Rosenthal demanded an immediate vote on Gregory's position. The result was swift, a unanimous vote to suspend Gregory from any role pending a full investigation. His outraged shouts filled the hall as security escorted him out. Silence settled over the dining hall once Gregory was gone. The board members turned to Ethan, who stood by Hannah Caroline at his side. Miss Rosenthal cleared her throat. "Young man, I believe the board owes you an apology. Our faith was shaken by rumors we now know were false. But your grandfather wished for you to step into a leadership position. We'd still like to know your stance." Ethan stepped forward. "I appreciate the board's faith in me, and I respect my grandfather's wishes. But I cannot in good conscience take over Addison Properties. My goals, my values, they just don't align with running a real estate empire. That's Hannah's realm. She's brilliant, driven, and she cares about Addison Properties. My only request is that you give her the support she needs to lead. Don't let Gregory sabotage her or the company any further." The board members exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement. Hannah looked at her brother with teary gratitude. "Thank you, Ethan. I'll do everything I can to honor grandfather's legacy." Ms. Rosenthal offered a small, smile. "Then it's settled. We'll have a formal meeting in a few days to confirm Hannah's leadership. In the meantime, Ethan, you have our best wishes." Ethan bowed his head. "Thank you. Now, if you will excuse me, I'd like to see my grandfather." That night, as a soft rain pattered against the mansion's windows, Ethan sat at his grandfather's bedside. The old man's breathing was shallow, his consciousness flickering. Caroline stood in this corner, heart aching at the sight. Peter Addison's stirred eyes fluttering open. He managed to focus on Ethan's face. "You resolved it?" Ethan nodded, his voice choked. "Yes, grandfather. You can rest. Hannah's in charge now. The board supports her. I'm not stepping into the business, but—" A tremor crossed the old man's lips, something like a smile. "I knew you'd make the right choice for you. You're a good man, Ethan." Ethan's tears slipped down his cheeks. "I love you, grandfather." Peter Addison squeezed Ethan's hand weakly. "Proud of you." With that, he sank back into the pillows, eyelids drifting shut. They stayed by his side all night, watching over him. In the early hours of the morning, Peter Addison passed away, leaving behind an empire, a fractured family, and a grandson who had finally found the courage to stand by his convictions. In the days after Peter Addison's funeral, a somber affair, attended by dignitaries, old friends, and the entire Addison family, Ethan felt both liberated and lost. With Gregory removed from the picture, Hannah took the helm of Addison Properties. She and Ethan parted on amicable terms, an older sister stepping into the role of CEO and a younger brother determined to live life his own way. Caroline stood by Ethan, helping him navigate his tangled emotions. She quietly marveled at the transformation in him since they first met. The secrets were out, the illusions gone. Now there was nothing left but raw honesty and, surprisingly, a deeper love. On their last night at the estate, Ethan took Caroline by the hand and led her out to the gardens. Fireflies danced above manicured hedges, and moonlight bathed them in silver. "You stayed," he whispered, pulling her close. Even after discovering everything, my family, my mistakes, my baggage, you still stayed. Caroline placed a hand over his heart. Because I love you, Ethan, and I'm sorry I ever doubted you. He kissed her, a tender and lingering moment that felt like a quiet promise. When they parted, he smiled. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want you with me. Caroline felt her heart swell. Then let's go home. They returned to Greenock just as the first traces of spring began to stretch across the town, buds blooming on trees, cafe patios reopening, and the slow, familiar rhythm of small-town life resuming. For Ethan and Caroline, it felt like returning from a different world entirely. The Addison estate, with its opulence and tension, now sat like a closed chapter in their memories, one filled with reckoning grief and ultimately clarity. Their modest apartment welcomed them with its soft lighting, cluttered bookshelves, and the comforting scent of lavender from Caroline's favorite candle. The trunk of Ethan's car held only a few items, old family photographs, a couple of first-edition books from the Addison Library, and his grandfather's watch, a symbol now of closure, not burden. The first few days back were quiet. They didn't talk much about the mansion or the funeral. Instead, they focused on grounding themselves, long walks through Greenock's parks, cooking simple meals together, reorganizing closets that hadn't been touched in weeks. It was their way of healing. One lazy afternoon, Caroline found Ethan sitting on their tiny balcony, sketchbook in hand, lost in thought, as he tried to capture the view of the town square. She brought him a cup of tea and settled next to him, tucking her legs underneath herself. The sunlight glinted off the face of his grandfather's watch. You're wearing it more now, she noted gently. Ethan glanced down, then smiled faintly. Not because I feel like I have to. It just reminds me of what matters. He wasn't perfect, but he believed in me, even at the end. Caroline leaned into his shoulder. And he was proud of you. So am I. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the birds chirping and the distant sound of children playing. Then Caroline nudged him playfully. So, French Riviera. Still off the table, Ethan laughed, the sound warm and easy. You're never going to let that go, are you? I'm just saying. She teased. Now that the whole world knows you're basically a secret heir, we could at least visit. Not for the flex, just for the view. He looked at her, eyes sparkling. We'll go. One day. But not because we're trying to prove anything, just because it's our dream. And we'll do it our way. Quiet, authentic, no fanfare. Caroline smiled, her heart swelling. That sounds perfect. As twilight descended, she reflected on how far they'd come. She remembered the nights filled with doubt, the petty jokes she'd made, the bitterness that once clouded their connection. But now, seated next to Ethan, the man she truly knew, flawed, principled, kind, she felt a deep, unwavering peace. It hadn't been money that saved their relationship. It was honesty, forgiveness, the willingness to confront ugly truths and still choose love. Later that evening, as they cleared the dishes from a simple pasta dinner, Ethan paused and turned to her. Caroline, he said, voice soft, thank you for standing by me through everything. She touched his face, her voice barely a whisper. You never needed to be anyone but yourself. That's who I love. Outside, the stars blinked into view one by one. Inside, two people who had nearly lost each other found something more lasting than fortune, a quiet kind of forever. Thank you for joining us on this dramatic journey filled with secrets, heartbreak, and ultimately the healing power of love. Caroline and Ethan's story reminds us that true wealth lies in the connections we forge and the courage we find to be our authentic selves. It's a powerful lesson that sometimes the most unassuming people carry the most remarkable stories, and that genuine love transcends the boundaries of social status. If this story moved you, made you think, or simply entertained you, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing with friends who love a good drama, and subscribing to our channel for more captivating tales. Leave a comment below telling us what inspired you most about Caroline and Ethan's journey. Until next time, remember, never judge a book or a person by their cover. Keep dreaming big, and we'll see you in the next story.